guys, so today we're talking about Megalopolis. Warning, this is going to be a very chaotic, probably a little disjointed commentary video because this film is also chaotic and disjointed. It's been just over a week now since I saw Megalopolis. I went and saw it opening weekend, and I somehow have so many thoughts, like an endless amount of opinions, and also none at all because I am just confused. It is by far the strangest experience I've had sitting in a cinema watching anything, trying to grasp this film as it happens. And as I've sat with it for the past week, it has both become more confusing, but has also made more sense, which I don't fully understand how that is possible. So I will start with kind of my more general thoughts around the film because I think that's the easiest way to start before I start really diving into the details of it. But ultimately, Megalopolis was one of my most anticipated films of the year. I've been fascinated following the story of this film getting made and all of what it was trying to achieve, because Francis Ford Coppola was really trying to do so much here, which I think becomes one of the problems, as we'll talk about later. But I will first say, I'm going to rip into this movie quite a bit. I have many criticisms. However, I am so glad it was made. I'm thrilled that it exists. And I do think you should watch Megalopolis. Even though I don't know if I can say it is an objectively good film, I think it's an interesting experience, and one that, even though in this video, as all of mine, I will be spoiling it, I don't know if you can really be spoiled because the experience of watching this film is such a fever dream that there's just no way of describing it will ever capture what it is like sitting through this. Yeah, I will start with the fact that I am glad it exists. I'm glad that Megalopolis is a film that Francis Ford Coppola made. I think it is commendable that he has spent 40 years trying to get this film made, and he eventually decided that he would make it independently, because he believes it should exist. Whether or not I think it is good or not, whether or not anyone thinks it's good or not, I don't think really matters to him all that much. I think he just wanted to make this film because he's been wanting to make it and has been attempting to for so long, and he is really committed to telling the story, again, whether I or anyone else thinks it is good or worth the time. And so for that, I really do commend the film. I think it is a deeply sincere project on Coppola's part, and I, again, just have massive respect for that, even if the film itself is wild to sit through. And I also do think films like this that are strange or controversial are what makes cinema progress. It's what improves film over time. It's what pushes different ideas, and because I do think there are many things in the film that work, which I will also talk about. In general, while I wouldn't say I necessarily enjoyed watching it or think it's a good movie, I do think it is worth watching, and I'm glad it exists. I know that makes no sense, but I think if you watch the film, that thinking will make sense to you. That you can simultaneously dislike it, but also love that it exists, and that it is worth your time, even though it also feels kind of redundant in a sense. However, I'm saying that I think people should watch it. A mainstream audience will hate this film. If people are just going to this film because they're like, oh, this is the newest Adam Driver led film, or they recognise lots of the cast, or they like Francis Ford Coppola as a director, but they're not prepared for the chaos of this film, they will hate it. A mainstream audience is not going to have a good time sitting in this film, because it's the kind of thing you just have to go in knowing this is an experience and it's going to make very little sense, but I am strapped in and willing to just kind of submit to whatever happens in this 2.5 hours. So that's my kind of general thoughts around the film. Now we get to how I felt while watching it, which for the most part I just kind of kept asking myself what the fuck was happening. There were several points where I was just sat there really questioning just what was going on in this film. It is, as I have said and will say a million times I'm sure, this is a very strange film. And it's very confusing. There are whole parts that make very little sense. There are plots that are started that we never see finished. Visually, it is very disorienting and strange. And yeah, just what the fuck was happening? I actually, like, the film has this feeling of feeling very cluttered and busy. Yet you also kind of feel like nothing has happened. And also, this is probably one of my main issues with the film, is that there is no sense of time in the film. Like, normally when you watch a movie, if they don't tell you explicitly, you at least kind of know how long the period of time is that the film has occurred over. However, in Megalopolis, I could not tell you how long the stretch of time is that the plot occurs over. I could not tell you how much time passes between each event of the film. I think that adds to this like fever dream like quality of it. But like, you can't watch a film and have no sense of time in it. Like, you feel so weird, like you're just kind of floating through this chaos. And that was something that I was really struggling with as I was watching the movie, was the fact that I just couldn't get a sense of the time passing. I had no real way of gauging that, which I found very difficult to sit through as time went on. I also do want to talk about the visuals in this film, because I think a lot of both of this film's successes and its problems are due to the visuals. It's a very experimental film, visually, in many senses. But in the same way, it isn't. It's very traditional. Essentially, everything in the film is a contradiction, in every sense. And I don't fully know how to articulate that. Again, I think so much of this will only make sense if you watch it. But anyway, some of the experimentation does work. And I do think some of the shots and direction are interesting, and some of the visual effects especially are super interesting. And I think if they were used in a different film that is less cluttered, they would be really effective and really, again, interesting, and would be really progressive cinema. However, because all of these experimental ideas are thrown together with this plot that is ultimately very convoluted, it ends up just being chaos that you can't discern anything that goes on. But so I would like to see some of the more interesting visual aspects of this film used in films that are better structured and more simple, because I do think that they would work, and because there are shots of this film that are gorgeous and I could look at all day. However, there are also lots of the visuals that do not work, partially because it's too busy and too cluttered, but also because of the visual effects. The VFX in this film is very weird looking. That's the only way I can really describe it, is like a lot of the visuals feel very strange and artificial, which on one hand does kind of work to lend to the dream-like quality of the film, and I also think too to highlight the kind of excess and wealth that the film is critiquing. I do think that these weird artificial settings work. However, some of the VFX was very flat and weird. It doesn't feel like a real world that could exist, despite this meaning to be the future. It's a very weird kind of place that it lands visually. Now I'm going to attempt to break down the plot of Megalopolis, which is somehow very simple and straightforward and easy to understand, yet it is also so convoluted and confusing to follow. I've never watched a film that somehow makes so much sense and yet so little at the same time. But so, we start with the film being set in New Rome in the 23rd century, which New Rome is essentially futuristic New York City, but then there's also like aspects of ancient Rome in it, but like in a futuristic sense. Like there's a Colosseum and they have chariot races in the Colosseum, but the rest of the city looks like New York City, but in the future. But then there are like giant Roman statues that are also animated. So, as a setting already, very strange. But we're set in New Rome in the 23rd century, and we follow Caesar Catalina, who is played by Adam Driver, who is an architect who has developed the building material megalon, and is looking to use this material to build a utopian city called Megalopolis. However, the current mayor, Franklin Cicero, played by Giancarlo Esposito, is more traditional. He's like kind of our more traditional understanding of a politician, and he does not support the idea of building Megalopolis, and he actively dislikes Caesar Catalina. This is in part because he was the DA who attempted to convict Caesar of being responsible in the death of Caesar's wife. So there's that happening. Then we also have Julia Cicero, played by Natalie Emmanuel, so obviously she is the daughter of the mayor, Franklin Cicero, but she becomes very intrigued by Caesar and his ideas, and so she starts working with him in the development of Megalon and eventually attempting to build Megalopolis, and they end up getting into a relationship which makes that dynamic more interesting with her father and Caesar and everything else. So that's the basic plot, and that basic plot is quite simple. However, we then have multiple subplots, some of which are abandoned throughout the film, and so you have no idea why we have been shown certain things. For instance, at one point they show us a Russian satellite in space, and they never mention this again. I still have no idea what it was for, what it was related to. That was just there. Other subplots are, we have Claudio, played by Shia LaBeouf, who is he's Caesar's cousin, and he's kind of useless, but he's attempting to also run for mayor, but in like a very weird, he's very manipulative, kind of populist, I would say. And I mean, I'm assuming they're trying to get him to potentially mirror Hitler's politics a little bit. I mean, the one visual of a tree, something that looks like a swastika, felt like a real slap in the face visually of like, that's what's happening. But so we are following Claudio attempting that. Then we also have Wow Platinum, played by Aubrey Plaza, which going into this film was like one of the only characters' names I knew because I heard Wow Platinum before this film came out. I was like, that is great character name. We will talk about the characters in general, but yeah, they should just do that now. Talking about the characters in general, the names, some of them are obviously taken from like ancient Rome, and those are the names they're going for, like Caesar, and also the uncle who owns the bank, who I've forgotten. Wait, let me Google him. Yeah, also side note, it is impossible to remember all of the characters in this film. There are so many characters that pop in and out, it gets very confusing trying to follow everyone, which is part of the reason why I cannot remember everyone's name. But yeah, Hamilton Crassus III, played by John Voight, who is the he's Caesar's uncle, and he also owns the main bank in New Rome. And so Wow Platinum, who is a journalist of some sort, she does a lot of things in this film I don't fully follow, but she ends up marrying him, obviously to acquire more wealth. It's very clear that that's what she wants, so she marries Crassus, and that becomes a whole nother subplot. In general, there's just a lot going on. There are many other subplots going on, like there is a random subplot about a teenage pop star who's a virgin, and it's clearly trying to do a critique on virginity culture, and then that turns into a subplot. It's also about deep fake AI porn and that being used, and it's a very strange. I don't even fully understand still. Again, I'm sorry if this video doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There are just whole parts that I am still trying to understand myself, and I don't know if I'll ever get there. But so yeah, we have our main plot, which is obviously between Caesar, Franklin Cicero, and Julius Cicero, and that's the easiest part to follow. It's the main thing we follow. But then we also have our other subplots that are going everywhere. So now I want to get onto the commentary this film attempts, and hopefully that will also make my plot summary make more sense, because right now I do think it's quite difficult to understand anything that I talk about. But so I'm going to start with saying that this film attempts to do a lot of commentary on things, and probably too much. I think it is attempting to discuss too many ideas at once, that it just becomes overwhelming, especially when the visuals are also so overwhelming that you just become overwhelmed watching it. But in my opinion, the film essentially asks the question of whether any one person's idea of a perfect society is achievable, and also whether corruption will always occur in the process of trying to reach that end goal. This is obviously a massive question to pose in any sense, let alone in a film. I think we see in Caesar someone who really does believe he can build this self-sustaining, perfect, utopian society, and that this will solve all of these problems. However, that is an end point, and he also has a clear disregard for the conditions, both socially and economically, of people in their current state, that he is willing to cause them harm in order to pursue this utopian future. However, obviously, causing direct harm to communities currently, especially those who are impoverished, they are having their homes destroyed by him in the process of making space to build Megalopolis, obviously very corrupt. But so, in Caesar's mind, he justifies this as, but we're building a utopia. So while his idea of perfect society may work, it's also clear through the story that corruption is occurring in the process of trying to achieve the utopian society. There's also another question I think is asked linked to this idea, which is whether or not a single person can determine what is best for a society on their own, and whether this is guaranteed to lead to corruption and inequality. And I would say yes, because even if that one person's core ideas are good, and if in the beginning their ideas are good, over time, they are guaranteed to become wrapped up in their own ideas. I think we see this a lot with Caesar Catalina, as he is very wrapped up in his own ideas and his intellectual process of everything, that he doesn't seem to have a real grasp on the practical outcomes of his current actions. And I also do think in general, like, ultimately if one person is given this authoritative power, they will be corrupt. Even if they are aiming for something good, something that's inherently good, they are still guaranteed to be corrupt in the fact that they are a singular person. I think that singularity automatically leads to corruption. Now, another question the film asks, again, see, the film poses a lot of questions, and I think all of them are good questions to ask. However, there's just a lot of them. It also asks the question of whether a utopia is possible, or is it guaranteed to become a dystopia due to the human nature of power and greed. So again, these like first kind of three questions I've discussed the film asking are all linked together and are all kind of asking the same thing in different terms, but also there are distinctions between them. But yeah, there is the question of whether a utopia is actually functionally possible, whether it is guaranteed to form some kind of dystopia, is guaranteed to be issues that cannot be overcome that could lead to bigger problems than what there are currently. And I do think it's very interesting. However, the film never answers any of these. I think maybe that's the issue with all of the questions it asks. I think plenty of great films ask questions that they don't provide answers to. However, in this film it asks you several questions and provides the answers to none, which makes things feel very, again, chaotic and confusing and cluttered. Another thing that the Megalopolis discusses that I find quite interesting is the idea of turning pain and trauma into art, and that this acts as kind of like a meta commentary, because Francis Ford Coppola kind of has this experience, and the film is a product of him doing that. But also within the film, we find out that Megalon is made in part by using Caesar's dead wife's DNA. Therefore, Caesar is attempting to build a utopia out of the remnants of someone he loves and through his pain, which I think is a very interesting way of discussing this idea of turning pain into arts, because I don't think that's a new question. I think that is one that's been posed for, hundreds of years probably. However, I do think this is a very interesting way of looking at that idea, because this is turning that pain into a more practical, at least in Caesar's eyes, more practical piece of work, I guess. So yeah, I also will go back to quickly the random subplot about the hypocrisy of placing a high importance on virginity and the issues of deepfake AI porn. This subplot happens for 10 minutes, and this commentary is like a 10-minute aspect of the film, which means it makes very little sense overall. But I do think the question itself is interesting, I just don't think it fits here. But yeah, so we see this pops up. Again, I have to Google this as well because I can't remember all of these characters. So you have this like teenage pop star named Vesta Sweetwater, who everyone believes to be a virgin. Part of why they are obsessed with her and love her is because of her virginity. So it's this idea of virginity culture and the hyperfixation on purity and all of those things. But then Shia LaBeouf's character Claudio broadcasts a deep fake porn video of Vesta Sweetwater, and then the whole public turns against her in response to this, because she is no longer believed to be a virgin. And this is, again, very random commentary to include in this film, completely unnecessary. However, I do think it's interesting. It just doesn't fit, but yeah, it's interesting to see all these very wealthy people, especially, and this occurs during the sequence in the Colosseum. All of these hyper wealthy people and their obsession with purity, and this idea of Vesta Sweetwater only being interesting or marketable when she is considered pure. It's obviously gross and weird, but then also Claudio using deepfake porn to, I don't really know what he's trying to achieve there, to be honest, to cause chaos mainly, because that's all he really does, is very interesting. So, in general, when I talk about the commentary of this film, I do think that the core ideas of this film are interesting and have a solid basis. However, they are muddied by the busyness and chaos of the film, as I've said already. All of the ideas that it presents are interesting and would make for very interesting films and stories. And even in this film, they do pose interesting questions, necessary questions. However, it is impossible to really reach any conclusions or to even feel like you can think about these critiques and these ideas, because the film is so cluttered and busy that the commentary becomes muddied and, again, strange, and it feels like you're missing pieces that you need to understand these ideas completely. It leaves us with too many questions. Like, commentary like this should leave you with questions, absolutely. I think a good commentary on something, good discussion, will lead to further questions, but this film leaves you with too many, which means that while the commentary in theory is good, in execution it becomes deeply flawed due to the way the film tells those stories, where the film makes that commentary and has those discussions. So now I just have some random points I need to make that didn't really fit into any other section of this video, because there's just so many random things. Like, even now I don't think I've covered everything. But firstly, every character feels like they are from a different movie. This is partly something to do with the actors and maybe partly in the writing, I can't tell, but every actor in this film is giving a different performance for a different film. I think Aubrey Plaza as Wow Platinum probably does the best job of understanding the absurdity of what's going on, and she's very funny and weird in this movie, but in a really good way that serves the film very well. I also think Adam Driver puts in a really committed performance, as he always does. I think he's an actor who really will wholeheartedly commit to the ideas, and I do think he understood Caesar quite well. I think he understands that Caesar Catalina is deeply serious in his worldview and in what he is trying to pursue, but he is also weirdly unserious and makes fun of things and kind of hates the world he's in and all of these hyper wealthy people, but also loves being in it. He's a very strange kind of force that moves through the film. And yeah, every other character is operating somewhere else. Really, like, I've never watched a film and not understood. Sorry, also, I hope I didn't sound sick in this video. I am kind of sick, so if I sound crazy, just know that's why. But yeah, every character feels that they should be in something else the whole time. It's very strange. It makes me feel like every actor read the script and didn't fully get it, so they all kind of just took whatever parts made sense to them and just went with it. And what they reached were all different conclusions. Also, literally everything in the film is a metaphor for something else. This, I think, is part of the reason why the movie becomes confusing and chaotic. I think metaphor is, when used well, is very effective, very interesting. However, having multiple characters act as metaphors for ancient Roman figures, having the entire film in some ways I think is meant to be a metaphor for the collapse of ancient Rome, but it's also like signalling the issues with our current capitalist society. Everything is a metaphor. It makes the film very strange when everything is meant to also be something else, and that again lends to the chaos of the film and the strange, confused state you end up in by the end of watching it. Also, like, another thing, metaphors, like, despite this essentially being New York City, but in the future there's also these like giant, like, ancient statues, but they're like animated, and so I actually do think this is one of the visual effects that did work really well that I liked, was like they would look tired, like one of them, like the woman, like the statue kind of, she's tired, so she like starts leaning on the building next to her, and I really liked that metaphor, and how like even those figures were like exhausted by the society they're in. I thought that was a very interesting, and I also do think it's one of the visual effects of the film that I really liked and thought was very cool when I was watching it. Something I didn't mention in the plot summary, because it has absolutely no impact on the plot, is that Caesar Castellina can stop time. Now we see this in the opening scene of the film. The first scene we watch Caesar stop time. Yet this has absolutely no impact on the plot at all. You would think something as massive as your lead character being able to pause time would be a major plot point, yet this is not used at all for that. It's just like random moments where he'll decide for like points of his convenience, like nothing at all usually, that he feels like pausing time. And then he like teaches Julia to at one point, which again makes no sense to me. I still don't know why, and I've watched other people's videos on it, and no one seems to know why Caesar Castellina can stop time. So I would love to know the reason, because it has no impact on the plot at all. Also, my last random point that I absolutely need to make, the one thing that was really bugging me in this movie, is the like PowerPoint transitions and intros and the fucking unnecessary narration, which we like at one point find out that the narrator is actually like Caesar's bodyguard. That's very random. Again, nothing comes of that, but the film has all of these transition screens like a PowerPoint slide that explain parts of the film or explain different references. I don't know if it's meant to give it like a storybook quality, because at the beginning we are told that Megalopolis is a fable, and whether it's meant to lend to that and that's why we have this. But either way, it's very weird, and just another thing visually as well that you're like, why is it here? Also, another thing I just realised that I didn't include in my notes, that I, upon watching this film, was just like, what is the point? The characters and quoting different figures, or just going on random like soliloquies. Like Caesar, just mid-conversation, will just start giving like a speech. Like he's in a Shakespearean play, and I guess again, this is trying to feed into the whole fable-like quality of Megalopolis. However, it's so unnecessary, it feels so weird and disjointed to mid-conversation start going on about something, just something, and I was sitting there, so like, why is he going on, or quoting philosophers unnecessarily? It's very weird. Like, there's a whole scene where Julia and Franklin Cicero are at like a table in Julia and Caesar's house, and her mother is there as well, and they just start quoting Marcus Aurelius back and forth for a whole scene. And they literally recite a quote and then say Marcus Aurelius, like it's written, and like they've written it in an essay of some sort, and are like reading it back and reciting it with like an in-text citation. It is very strange. There's also another scene of the two of them where they're just speaking Latin for no reason. And again, it's just these random things that do not add to the film and just make it more confusing. And I don't fully understand why that was there. So, in conclusion, Megalopolis is a movie. It is that. There's one thing I can say. I have described it when talking to people about it as like the experience of Megalopolis is like someone took a copious amount of drugs, and then while they were high, they proceeded to read insane amounts of ancient philosophy and politics and history books, and this is the product of that. It is, again, it is a very strange film. It is an experience of a film. I do think if you are willing to submit yourself to a very strange experience like this, you should. If you're willing to go sit for 2.5 hours and just be willing to experience everything this film offers, I think you'll have like a good time. I think, yeah, the way to watch Megalopolis is to understand that it will not make complete sense to you. It is convoluted and strange looking and a very weird film. But I do still think, as I said in the beginning, I'll say it again, I'm happy it exists. I'm happy I watched it. I think I'll be very interested to see how I feel about it upon a second watch. I don't know whether I can sit through it again, but I might try just to see if maybe it makes sense once I'm not shocked by everything as much. But either way, Megalopolis is a film. It is a massive film, and it is experimental and strange, as I keep saying, and it's a real just experience. I think, yeah, I do think people should go and experience Megalopolis, regardless of whether it's objectively good or bad, because I don't think it is either. But so yeah, that's Megalopolis. That's the video. I hope it made at least somewhat sense. I know this is probably quite a rambly video from me. I don't know if much of it will make coherent sense. But I hope you liked it. I feel like it's a hard one to say. I hope people like the video. I'm hoping it's an understandable video anyway. But yeah, if you did happen to like the video, please hit the like button, I guess. If you'd like to see more from me, you can subscribe. You can also follow me on my other social media, Instagram, TikTok, all of those places. They're linked down below. You can also see my makeup and special effects work there, as well as normally what videos are coming. I sometimes hint at or show, and other things that I'm doing. But yeah, I hope you like the video. Next video will be about Severance, because I finally have gotten around to watching season 1 of Severance, and I only have 2 episodes left, which I'm probably going to finish today as I'm filming this. But so yeah, that is the next video. So also, if that sounds interesting to you, subscribe. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you've seen Megalopolis, I'd love to know what your experience was with the film. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Bye.